because there are those who made a track to the river's edge to allow us to be in the position that we are right now. I know that we love to lift up the names that we know and are familiar in history, such as one of the greatest prophets in American history by the name of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who transformed the social landscape of America. But there are others who made a track to the river's edge that we need to also lift up if we are going to understand the legacy of Dr. King. Maybe you've never heard of this gentleman, a person by the name of Vernon Johns. Vernon Johns, who came from Lynchburg, Virginia, who was a pastor at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church before Dr. King made his way down to Montgomery. He grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia at the height of segregation. He demanded in his mind and in his spirit that he would not be locked into the racial animus of the time, and said that I will leave Virginia and go to a school in Ohio by the name of Oberlin. But as some of you know, during segregation, you did not go to school 9 months out of the year. You only went to school 4 months out of the year because the rest of the time you were picking cotton or tobacco. But it was Vernon Johns who said, I'm going to apply to Oberlin, and he put his application in, sent it off, but he then also packed his suitcase after he sent his application, because he said, I'm going to show up the day my application shows up. Yes. Because if you're going to deny me, you're going to deny me to my face. And so he got off the train and made his way over to the dean's office in Oberlin and said, I'm here to start class. And the dean was flustered by this young man who'd been kissed by nature's son like you and I, wondering what was he doing on this campus, because this is a campus that is for those who come from that European tradition, and we don't let too many people who look like this young man from Lynchburg, Virginia. But it was Vernon Johns who said, I'm here to start school. And the dean said to him, when he finally found his application, he says, it looks here, Vernon, that you have some challenges here, that you don't have enough credits to come to this school. And Vernon Johns, with his quick wit, said, do you want brains or do you want credits? I got the brains, I may not have the credits. And the dean was a little bit upset with Vernon Johns at that moment and said, young man, if you're going to be a part of this school, you must be able to read Greek fluently. And Vernon Johns scanned the bookcase of the dean and then found a Greek book, opened it up, read it fluently, and said, again, do you want somebody with brains or do you want somebody with credits? The dean thought that was a cute trick. And then he said, but you also have to read Hebrew fluently. And then Vernon Johns found a Hebrew book and read that fluently and said, again, do you want somebody with brains or do you want somebody with credits? And they let him into the school, and he graduated second in his class. And then he was eventually called, in the 1940s, he was called to a church in Alabama, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And down in Alabama, at the height of segregation, he was always preaching challenging sermons at the height of segregation. Let me give you a few of the sermons Vernon Johns preached. One sermon was, is heaven segregated? If you can imagine in 1940 preaching, is heaven segregated, what that would do to you in Alabama. But one sermon he preached was, is it legal to lynch Negroes in Alabama? He even put the sign out there on the church and said, this is what I'm preaching. And the sheriff showed up because he found out what he was going to preach on Sunday morning. Now you got to be a bad preacher to have the police show up on Saturday night to find out what you're going to say on Sunday morning. And they arrested him for what he was going to preach. Now that's a whole nother message right there. When you get arrested for what you haven't said but you're going to say, people are worried about what you're going to say, but you ain't even said it yet. And so we see here that here in the story, he is there amidst all of these sheriffs and deputies, and they do not respect him. They do not call him Pastor Johns, Dr. Johns, or Reverend Johns, even though he was more educated than everybody in the police station. They said, Vernon, you need to tell us what you're going to preach on Sunday. What is this message about lynching Negroes? Well, they didn't say Negroes. They used another term at that moment. And Vernon Johns, with his quick wit, looked around and saw that everybody had a revolver on their hip. And he said, I'd be more than happy to tell you what I'm going to preach on Sunday. He took his hat off. He said, but I'm a Baptist preacher. And before I can preach and tell you, and he poured out his hat and said, I've got to take an offering. And he was able to get out of that moment, and every single Sunday, he was trying to push the people to recognize that we cannot accept the system that is here in Alabama. And eventually the deacons got tired of them because they were such a middle-class church, and they did not want to be disturbed by the preacher saying things about how they should operate. And eventually they put Vernon Johns out. The deacons got together and said, we ain't never gonna have this happen again. And as they got together, they said, we've got to find somebody we can mold. We've got to find a young preacher that will do what we say. And so one deacon said, I heard of a young man who just got his PhD from Boston. I invite that we say we bring him down here. He's 26 years of age, and he can mold him into the preacher that we want him to be. And then they unanimously voted to call Martin Luther King Jr. as the next pastor. That it was Vernon Johns who made a way for Martin Luther King. And we need to know that we are in this position here today because somebody else made a way for you. Don't act like you're so cute and act like you're so smart. There was somebody who prayed for you, somebody who encouraged you, somebody who lifted you. We need to give thanks to those who made a way for us. There is always somebody who makes a way. What of the great music that comes out of New Orleans, such as people by the name of Wynton Marsalis. But before there was a Wynton Marsalis, you've got to know somebody like a Dizzy Gillespie and know a Miles Davis and know a Buddy Bolden. Before you get all excited about a LeBron James or a Stephen Curry, you need to know that there was somebody before them. You need to know an Isaiah Thomas and a Michael Jordan. You need to know an Allen Iverson, a Magic Johnson. You need to know a Dr. J, but also a Bill Russell and an Oscar Robertson. Before you get excited about Ta-Nehisi Coates, you also need to know that before he was writing, there was somebody by the name of James Baldwin and Alain Locke and W.E.B. Du Bois. Before you get excited about all of the great writers right now, but you need to know something about a Toni Morrison, a Lorraine Hansberry, and Octavia Butler, and a Zora Neale Hurston. Before you get excited about Eddie Glaude and Cornel West, you need to know before they were born that there was somebody by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois, that you need to know that there is always somebody who has made a way for you. So do not act like you did it all by yourself. There is somebody who built a bridge and made a track to the river's edge. And that is what I love about this particular text. And this text is about a man who says that I'm going to make a way for somebody else. That my entire ministry is designed to open a door for somebody who is not yet here. That I'm here to bless somebody who will come after me. And that is the key point of leadership. It is good that you're a leader now, but are you preparing leadership for the next generation? And that's what I love about John. John recognizes that he's not going to allow his ego to get in the way of his assignment. He is really clear that my assignment is to make a way for somebody else. I am designed, that I am specifically called to make sure that somebody is able to come after me, because my job is simply to be a stagehand and not to be the star. It is Robert Weber who says it this way, that when you understand worship, that you must understand that there is only one star, and there is only that everybody else is a stagehand, and that if you are not doing a good job as a stagehand, it means that somebody is focusing on you instead of focusing on the star. Well, who is the star? Well, Jesus is the star, and God is the audience, and the Holy Spirit is the director. And John understands that I must release my ego in order to open a door for somebody else. But here is the thing that I love so much, Pastor, about this text. It says here that he is in the desert. He recognizes his desert assignment. That I'm clear that I've been called to a low-resource community. In order for that community to be blessed, I am called to a desert assignment. And how often we have forgotten that we have been called to a desert assignment. And that because of those who've been called to a desert assignment, we have been able to move into spaces we never thought that we would be able to move into. Let me see if I can break it down. I know we love to talk about Black Lives Matter as if that's something new, but I'm here to let you know that Harriet Tubman started the first Black Lives Matter movement before Black Lives Matter was even a hashtag. She said that it is my role and my responsibility not person out of slavery, but as many as I can. She said, I would have gotten more than 300 out of slavery if they had known they were actually slaves, and that we must recognize that we are called to a desert assignment. How do you think we got 116 historically black colleges? It is because people were able to pool their pennies together, but some of us, we can't even keep the schools open today. That our ancestors could do more with less, and we have more and we're doing less. We are called to a desert assignment. When you're called to a desert assignment, you understand and recognize that you owe a debt to other people who opened a door for you. That is why I'm troubled by the political language that has been used on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I want to let you know that I'm coming from Chicago. Chicago, Illinois was founded by Jean-Baptiste Dussable, who was a Haitian immigrant. If Jean-Baptiste had never settled Chicago, there would never be a Harold Washington. If there was no Harold Washington, there would be no Reverend Jesse Jackson. If there was no Jesse Jackson, then Barack Obama would never become senator. If Barack Obama never became senator, he would never become president. I'm sorry, you need to understand that we owe a debt to Haiti. It was to sign the overture that had that great revolution that overthrew the French. It was the first free African nation in the Western Hemisphere. And because of the freedom of Haiti, they didn't just free themselves, they also freed black people in Venezuela and also in Ecuador. And when America needed people to fight against the British, it was Haitians who showed up to fight in 1776. We need to be careful about talking about Haiti. And don't you know, because they defeated the French, defeated Napoleon, the worst defeat that he had ever received in his life, France was in $40 million debt. And in order to get that debt off of the record, Napoleon, they had to sell their most lucrative property, which was in the United States, that was called Louisiana. So that was the Louisiana Purchase. And because of the Louisiana Purchase, it was Haitians that moved to Louisiana in a place called New Orleans. And if they had not moved to New Orleans, there would be no jazz. If there was no jazz, there would be no Louis Armstrong. If there was no Louis Armstrong, there'd be no Dizzy Gillespie. If there was no Dizzy Gillespie, there would be no Miles Davis. If there was no Miles Davis, there would be no Wynton Marsalis. If there was no Wynton Marsalis, there would be no Trombone Shorty. And if there was no Trombone Shorty, he would never collaborate with Kendrick Lamar, and you wouldn't know the song To Pimp a Butterfly and be able to say, be humble, sit down. So don't talk about Haiti and disrespect our ancestors. Is there anybody in here that you know we owe a debt to somebody else? Have to have assignment in the desert. It was John who had his assignment. I am called to the desert. I'm called to make a way for somebody else. Somebody who is not yet even born. Here he is in the desert. What I love about him is that even though he is in the desert, his proclamation is bigger than his location. People from the city, people from the rural area are coming to see John. What I love about John, Pastor, is John is John. John ain't trying to be nobody else. I ain't trying to preach like nobody else. I ain't trying to teach like nobody else. I'm just John. I'm not changing my outfits. I like what I wear. I'm not changing my diet. I'm going to eat organic whether you like it or not. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm trying to live out my call. And that is one of the things that we must understand, that copies are always inferior to the original. You need to be who you are. You don't need to be anybody else. Can't nobody sing like you. Can't nobody preach like you. Can't nobody teach like you. Stop trying to be somebody else, thinking the grass is greener on the other side, because the grass may be astroturf anyway. So you need to know that God has called you to be who you are. John is in the desert. called there. He has an assignment. Just as Dr. King had an assignment in the desert. Isn't it amazing that at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, you can barely fit 175 people in there. But Dr. King did not have a large church, but he had a large proclamation. Then when you go to Great Britain and you say Martin Luther King, they know the name. If you go to South Africa, they know the name. If you go to Saudi Arabia, they know the name, because his proclamation was bigger than his location. You do not need to expand, you need to expand your spiritual territory, not necessarily your physical territory. That God is saying to us that we do not need to look at others in order to understand who we are and whose we are. John is in the desert and his proclamation is bigger than his location. Because when you recognize that your proclamation is bigger than your location, you have an understanding that I would not be here if it had not been for other people. That I stand on the shoulders of others. This is why John is in the desert in the first place, Pastor. He's in the desert because of what was known as the Maccabean revolt. Because of the Maccabean revolt, there was a revolt against a Persian incursion into Palestine. That they were trying to co-opt the temple and say that you can preach whatever you want, but don't preach anything about social justice. And so it was in the temple that the priests decided that we are going to push out the Persians. But as a result of that, when Rome came in, they realized that the power of the community was in their faith. So the first thing that they did was, instead of sending in troops, they sent in politicians to say, let us co-opt the high priest. And if the high priests are then in the pocket of Rome, we don't have to worry about any revolutionary movement. But John has started a revolutionary movement of HLM, that Hebrew Lives Matter. And he wanted to make sure that people understood what God was doing in our lives. And so John stands on the shoulders of that Maccabean revolt, and that is why he is in the desert and not within the temple. Just as Dr. King, he had this movement, he was connected, and truth be told, most churches rejected him. Most preachers did not want to be seen with him. They did not want to stand behind him. I know everybody loves him now he's dead. But when he was living, there were those who would hide. Even his own denomination, the National Baptist Convention, had to put him out because they were afraid of what he is saying. But now, you don't know the names of those who thought they were so powerful back in the day. That's why I love going to D.C. and going to the King Memorial, because it is the only person who is a non-politician who has a memorial in Washington, D.C. There he is between Jefferson and Lincoln. While Jefferson and Lincoln are sitting and looking, you will notice that Dr. King has his hands crossed, as if he's looking at democracy to make sure you better do right by God and do right by my people. So we stand on the shoulders of someone else. Just as I stand today, I stand on the shoulders of someone else. My name is Otis Moss III. I stand on the shoulders of Otis Moss Jr. Before there was an Otis Moss Jr., there was an Otis Moss Sr. And before there was an Otis Moss Sr., there was a Benjamin Elijah Mays. Before Benjamin Elijah Mays, there was a John Hope. Before John Hope, there was a W.E.B. Du Bois. Before Du Bois, there was a Booker T. Washington. Before Booker T. Washington, there was a Frederick Douglass. Before Frederick Douglass, there was a Roger Williams. Before Roger Williams, there was an Anabaptist movement in Europe. Before the Anabaptists, there was John Calvin. Before John Calvin, there was Martin Luther. Before Martin Luther, there was John Wycliffe. Before John Wycliffe, there was Thomas Aquinas. Before Thomas Aquinas, there was St. Augustine. Before St. Augustine, there was Tertullian. Before Tertullian, there was Cyprian. Before Cyprian, there was Paul. Before Paul, there was Peter. Before Peter, there was Jesus. Before Jesus, there was John. Before John, there was Isaiah. Before Isaiah, there was Solomon. Before Solomon, there was David. There was Deborah before Deborah. There was Joshua before Joshua. There was Moses before Moses. There was Joseph before Joseph. There was Jacob before Jacob. There was Isaac before Isaac. There was Abraham before Abraham. There was Noah before Noah. There was Cain and Abel before Cain and Abel. There was Adam and Eve before Adam and Eve. There was God. And God is somebody whose shoulders we stand on. And always know that we stand upon someone else's shoulders. John is in the desert. John's proclamation is bigger than his location. But I must bid you farewell. May the Lord bless you real good on this day. But I'm here to let you know that we are all called to make a way. It's not good enough to say I made it unless you bring somebody with you. It's not good enough to say I'm blessed and highly favored unless you take your blessings and you bless somebody else with what you've been blessed with. It's not enough to say I'm saved and sanctified unless you're reaching your hand out for somebody else. You're called to make a way. Somebody open the door for you. Keep the door open for somebody else. Somebody picked you up. Pick somebody else up. Somebody blessed you. Then you need to bless
somebody else.
Somebody else. We are called to make a way. And I have to tell you that we are called to block for somebody else. Let me see if I can break it down. I was watching ESPN some years ago. There was a particular gentleman interviewing one of the football players. The gentleman who was doing the interview was white. The football player was black. The white interviewer said, you know what? I don't like it when you get in the end zone and you like to celebrate. It's so unsportsmanlike that you start pointing at everybody behind you, taunting your opponent, and then you start pointing up. What is that all about? And then the young man said, obviously you never played football. Because I've got to let you know, I'm not pointing at the people who tried to tackle me. I'm pointing at the people who blocked for me. I'm pointing at the people who took the hit for me, who were bruised for me, who were battered for me, who were hurt for me. And I have to give them thanks that I made it into the end zone because they blocked for me and made a way for me. And so it is proper etiquette to say thank you. And so I've got to get on out of here, but I've got to say thank you to my Aunt Callie, and thank you to my Aunt Chelsea, thank you to my mother, and thank you to my father, thank you to my sister, and thank you to my brother, thank you to the Bradley family. But after I'm done thanking everybody down here, thank you, Solomon Kinlock, for this invitation. But there's one more person I've got to thank who was bruised for me, who was broken for me, who was hurt for me, who was hung at Calvary. And when I think about him and all he's done for me, my soul cries out, hallelujah, give thanks unto God. Is there anybody in here? Has God been good to you? Has God blessed you? Then go ahead and give God thanks. We are called to make a way for somebody else. God bless you.
While you're standing on your feet, while you're standing on your feet as we prepare to dismiss today.